Hello, my name is Maria Ellie Marquez Marine, and I'll be talking about climate impacts in Alaskan communities today. The community I chose was Kotzebue, Alaska, which is our northwestern region here, and the Inupiat name for it is Kikatukruk. I'm pretty sure I didn't say that word right, but as you can see, this island, it's a word for what looks like a thin island. And on the map, you can see the airstrip right here. And then this little general areas here is pretty much their only route to come in and out of. And every year they rely on sea ice to actually come in and out of this small, well, it's actually a very large community by Alaska standard. The other coastal communities that I will be referring to is Kivalina, and it's, I believe, 80 miles from north of Kotzebue, and they also are considered a coastal region and have similar uh, environmental security changes that could impact Kotzebue in the years to come. So, my general impact for their Alaska community in Kotzebue is environmental securities. There are recent changes in the level of temperatures that they normally see on a yearly basis, and in turn, these impact their food or their subsistence activity in gathering the foods, their health, and some of it can be attributed to the food aspect. Another one is their contact with nature or how they interact and um, live in this community. Their cultural identity, and it can be as small as having to change their traditional ceremonies to actually having to leave that area if they do not adapt to the environmental changes, and overall fate control. So this small uh, change little by little will end up having them depart Kotzebue region. So the environmental security changes in this community overall is having the sea ice either disappear too early, having the sea ice be too thin to utilize for hunting, or not having the sea ice come in at all. And this was actually one of the reasons why I mentioned the other coastal communities. Most of them have seen their sea ice not come in until very late. One communities or village, excuse me, saw their ice come in very late that it actually had sea waves start to slowly erode their coastal coastline. So Lance Kramer, he's a pastor in Kotzebue, and he mentioned that he's used to seeing the ice freeze up 4 to 5 feet thick. When ice freezes, there's really more of a guess when it comes to stepping out on it. And one way of measuring how thick it is to actually pierce it. So when it comes to hunting on the ice, you could be chasing after something and you potentially do not have that feet accurate enough to what your activity is on there. And with Mr. Lance Kramer, he actually indicated that at one point in time, their sea ice was so thin that they were not able to get any of their their game that year in 2019, and they went further and further up on the ice trying to get to a thicker ice, and they ended up coming back empty-handed, which is very unfortunate. Mainly, these communities rely on the food as a whole. The community will disperse to each other what they have hunted or gathered, and so coming back empty-handed actually impacts more than just one family. And he also mentioned that ice have being there is actually what starts the whole ecosystem in their area, where it actually introduces the algae, and then algae is eaten by a larger animal, and so on and so forth. Eventually, you'll have your walruses, your whales, and um, they hunt baleen whales, walruses, seals. I believe I forgot that little bird, but it's a grouse bird that they hunt there. So all this is dependent on having the sea ice basically provide that cover for the algae to start off on. These are some photos that I actually saw online. I did reference where they're from, but it was just a gathering of photos, I guess. And this one was back in 1950s, and it looks like it's summertime. However, you can see that the individual has set up the fish to dry, and this in turn will be stored in an ice cellar that is frozen year round. With this meat, it's actually intended for family consumption, as there's really no, like, she doesn't have hair nets on, or no, safety gloves or anything really like that. So that she's actually practicing subsistence gathering and hunting and in this area by this picture. And this is more than likely meant for either one or two families, or maybe even a community hanging up their meat to dry. This is that was it. The beluga whale, and blubber is also stored in these ice cellars, and it is being hung up here to dry. So they have their ice cellar that is being threatened by the environmental climate changes, to where the land is actually thawing out around it. And when it thaws out, it has the moisture come out of the land itself, and it might freeze during the night. So any meat stored there will get, in a way, frost burns. And also, there has been time where the meat actually spoiled. And when you have meat that's spoiled, it's not just one or two trays of meat like we're used to in our freezer, but actual whole animals that was either hunted by the family members or given to by other community hunters. From this, medical and health issues may arise since everyone needs to eat. Um, One of the examples I have here is the ice cellar containing bowhead and beluga, whale meat, and blubber. The meat was to hold them over for either days, months, the year, and with it going to waste, they can actually have it consumed still and introducing gastrointestinal issues. So another example of a coastal environmental erosion is having the ice come in too late, to where in 2007 there was actually greater flooding than it being colder, and they had to depart from that Cavalina, and they landed in Kotzebue temporarily. However, that made families realize that the cultural or the environment changes was actually impacting them socially and culturally, um, and in the end, their fate. What were they going to do? The Kivalina were going through this problem solving steps, and one of the solution was to reside in Kotzebue. However, they themselves recognize their own cultural difference, and they mentioned that they would actually just be visitors in Kotzebue. It would not be the same. Their neighbors and their livelihoods, their way of living would be different. Their normal day to day traditions and um, hunting methods or what is available to them would differ so much that they would not recognize themselves as being a part of the Kotzebue community, but different, separate. So in the end, this will impact their mental, their cultural, and fate control and how secure they feel living in these coastal regions. So I created a small diagram, and I just wanted to show a couple of examples of how it all leads into one huge danger that they should be preparing for if they don't start adapting now. So having a lack of sea ice will happen, either causing no ice roads for Kotzebue or ice shelf available for them to hunt. And with them having no ice roads, the transportation cost of supplies coming in will be higher or less supplies come in. And in turn, this is going to be health and medical danger since the food availability will either be, not buying that food because of the price. One article that I did mention in my writing was that the cost of a frozen turkey was $99, and that just in Kotzebue, and that just highlights how high the price of food is. So you'll be, as a family member, deciding, do I want turkey or do I want warmth? And that's just no way for a family to live. And also, a lack of frozen ground jeopardizes the ice cellar, which in turn spoils the meat, or the blubber, which could be used for heat. And in turn, it'll have health dangers attributed to colder homes or no food, which will have people either be underweight, um, unhealthy, choosing different foods than what they culturally are used to, either higher in fat. And in turn, this is a medical danger for the community as a whole, with higher cases of sugar content in the blood. It'll, of course, be diabetes, overweight, and other issues. And with a lack of ice buffering a coastal community such as Kotzebue, they won't be protected against the sea waves, which in turn will turn into uh, higher wind speeds impacting their buildings. And if their buildings are not adequately engineered for it, then they'll end up losing that shelter. And in turn, they can lose their life with any damaged debris flying around or no place to live. And that again brings in the fate control, the cultural identity coming into play of how secure they feel living in Kotzebue. If they were to have a higher water line because of the lack of sea ice, freezing, it would in turn lead to coastal erosion. And as you can see, Kotzebue is actually surrounded all all around it. So little by little, their coasts going away will have less vegetation, less land, and it may lead to no food being found, such as the normal game that they're used to coming in there to lay on their coast. So the community will end up having to move away, and then